I want you to think about, well, the defining assumption of your life. And honestly, the defining assumption of our entire modern world.
Right. It's an invisible rule,
Yeah,
really.
exactly. It's this deep-seated belief that just because we can do something, because we have the tech or the capital or just the sheer willpower,
Yeah.
we automatically assume that we should do it.
Yeah. We treat raw capability as if the universe just handed us a blank permission slip.
Right.
And I mean, it is the ultimate blind spot of modernity. We are so obsessed with generative power. Like, we want to bring all these new possibilities into reality, new apps, new social structures, biohacks. But we rarely, if ever, stop to ask if those possibilities actually possess the structural integrity to stick around.
Wow, yeah. We totally confuse the sheer power to create something with the legitimacy to let it continue. And that friction, that massive gap between what's possible and what is actually sustainable is our mission for today.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. The stack of sources we are taking a deep dive into today is just wild. It's a dense, fascinating collection of philosophical and mathematical texts, heavily drawing on frameworks developed by a research group called Noetic Labs.
Yes, Noetic Labs.
Right. And the whole thing centers on a single massive concept they call the Admissible Path. Our goal is to extract the core philosophy here. What is this framework? How does the math behind it actually work? And why does it totally rewrite our understanding of reality and technology? So let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because reading through these sources, I realized this isn't just dry academic theory. This is a lens that changes how you view your job, your relationships, and literally the future of civilization.
Absolutely. But to even begin to grasp the admissible path, we have to start with an ontological shift. We have to completely tear down how we perceive a thing. The Noetican texts introduce what they call the Great Distinction. Now, the legacy view of reality, like the way you and I were taught to see the world in grade school, treats existence as a gallery of static being.
Like a museum. You walk through life and you see a building, a government, a coffee cup, a person. They're just solid objects sitting on pedestals.
Exactly. Which leads to a fatal assumption. When we view reality as a collection of static objects, we assume existence is their default state.
Right, like they just get to be there.
Yeah. We assume the coffee cup or the government just gets to exist for free until some external force, a hammer or a revolution comes along and smashes it. But the admissible path shatters that illusion. It argues for a framework called ongoing becoming.
Ongoing becoming. Okay.
Right. Existence is not a gallery. It is a dynamic, highly pressurized continuation field. Everything is a continuation structure.
Okay, let me try to map this to something visual. If I'm not looking at a static object, am I looking at something more like a spinning plate, like a circus trick, where it only stays up as long as I'm actively putting energy into keeping it balanced?
The spinning plate is a good start, but the sources actually use an even more fundamental analogy, a flame.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, look at a candle. You don't think of a flame as a solid, static object that just sits there. A flame is a continuation structure. It only exists in a given millisecond because there is fuel and oxygen actively supporting its combustion right then.
In that exact millisecond.
Yes. The moment you cut off the oxygen, the flame isn't broken by a hammer. It just ceases to continue.
Wait, but a flame is obvious, right? It's energy. What about something massive and physical? What about a bridge?
Breathe.
Yeah, like when you cut the ribbon on a suspension bridge, it's built. It's done.
Well, the Noetican texts actually tackle the bridge explicitly because it is the ultimate counterintuitive example. In the framework of ongoing becoming, that bridge is never finished.
Never finished, but
Okay.
it's steel and concrete.
Right, but it is an active, ongoing process of a structure holding its own against gravity, against the wind, against the expansion of steel in the summer heat, and against entropy. The bridge is constantly becoming a bridge every single second.
Wow.
It is negotiating with reality to maintain its form.
So if existence isn't a granted right, if everything from a steel bridge to a marriage to a democracy is essentially just a very slow-burning flame, then continuing to exist is an act of war against disorder.
It completely reframes stability. Stability is not the default. It is a staggering high-level structural achievement. You have to earn your continuation.
But that creates a huge logistical nightmare, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If every single system requires a continuous feed of support and energy just to not collapse, how do we choose? Like, how do we know which possibilities actually deserve the fuel?
That dilemma brings us to the central crisis of our era, The sources call it the catastrophic category error.
The category error. Right.
Modernity believes that if a path is traversable, it has the inherent right to exist. But just because you can build a massive, energy-hungry system doesn't mean the environment can sustain it.
Right.
So, the admissible path answers this with its bedrock principle, which is the supreme canonical law.
I remember reading that phrase and thinking it sounded like something out of a sci-fi religion. The supreme canonical law.
I know, the wording is very absolute, but the rule itself is absolute. It states that continuation must remain accountable to the conditions that make continuation possible.
Meaning you cannot consume the foundation you were standing on.
Exactly.
You can't burn the ship to keep the cabin warm.
That is the essence of it. If your method of surviving or growing inherently corrupts or collapses the soil you're growing in, you violate the law of continuation. You have made yourself inadmissible.
Okay, I'm going to throw a massive wrench in this on behalf of anyone listening who works in tech or venture capital or just modern business.
Go for it.
The entire engine of human progress for the last 200 years has been unconstrained growth. Move fast and break things, disrupt the old models. If we constantly worry about our footprint on the foundational soil, we'd never invent anything.
Right.
Isn't raw possibility the whole point of innovation?
What's fascinating here is that the texts anticipate that exact defense, and they dismantle it by introducing the concept of runaway capability. Unbounded growth is categorized here as false freedom.
False freedom. How so?
Well, when a system, let's say a hyperscaling startup, operates without constraints, it maximizes speed by consuming its own support fields for short-term gain. It burns out its employees, it skirts regulations, it depletes community trust.
So it looks wildly successful on a quarterly earnings report.
Yes, but structurally, it is cannibalizing its own future. The framework points out that true innovation does not destroy its host. You know what biological system perfectly embodies unconstrained growth, moving fast, and ignoring the boundaries of its environment?
Tumor.
A tumor. It is incredibly successful at raw continuation, right up until it kills the support system it relies on, which of course kills the tumor. Sustainable freedom, actual freedom, requires bounded becoming.
Which introduces the need for a filter. Because if unbounded growth is fundamentally a tumor, the universe or society needs a mechanism to filter which of these raw possibilities are actually allowed to become real.
Exactly.
And the sources lay out this gauntlet called the semantic pipeline. Walk me through this because it's dense, but it feels like the blueprint for the whole theory.
It is. The semantic pipeline is basically the operational flow of reality. It starts with possibility. These are the infinite things we could do. But possibility must flow into constraint.
And this is where the modern mind rebels. We hate constraint. We view boundaries as cages.
We do, but the admissible path introduces the paradox of the boundary. Boundaries do not restrict freedom. They are the architectural requirement for freedom to endure.
Right.
The Noetican texts use a brilliant auditory metaphor here. Think of raw sound. Unconstrained sound can be any frequency, any volume, at any time. It is totally free. But without boundaries, it's just noise. It means nothing.
But when you apply constraint to that sound, when you force it into the rules of grammar, syntax, and tone, that constrained sound becomes communicable thought. The boundary is what gives the sound its power. It turns noise into music or a speech.
That's a great way to put it. Constraint gives form. So possibility hits constraint. The next step is verification.
Okay, verification.
Right. Reality tests that constrain form. Does it hold up? It passes verification, it achieves admissibility. It is allowed to exist. Admissibility leads to sustained continuation. And finally, long-term continuation yields meaning.
Possibility, constraint, verification, admissibility, continuation, meaning. That is a heavy pipeline. But here's where my mind was completely blown.
Yeah.
They don't just leave this as some poetic metaphor about sound and grammar. They turn it into cold, hard math. They introduce admissible persistence theory, or APT.
This is the mechanism that moves the framework from abstract philosophy into rigorous systems accounting. The cornerstone of APT is a surprisingly elegant formula, the admissibility margin. It's written as M equals V minus B minus T.
Okay, I am notoriously bad at math, so when I saw algebraic variables in a philosophy text, I panicked. But I actually spent an hour unpacking this. Let's go through it slowly, because this formula is like the secret decoder ring for the whole concept.
Sure.
We're solving for M, the admissibility margin. For any path or system to be allowed to exist, M has to be 0 or greater. So what are the other letters?
V is your system's viability reserve. It is your foundational strength. If we're talking about a human, V is your physical health, your mental resilience, your savings account. It's what you have to draw upon.
Okay, so V is the fuel in the tank.
Next is B, which stands for burden. This is the external cost, the load required to make a transition or maintain a state. Like if you buy a massive house, the mortgage and the property taxes are the external burden.
Got it. And then we subtract T, which is tension. This is the internal strain, the systemic friction caused by bearing the burden.
Put it all together. Your margin, M, equals your viability, V, minus the external burden, B, minus the internal tension, T. If your foundational strength is large enough to absorb both the external load and the internal friction, your margin stays positive.
The path is admissible.
Exactly.
Let me test my understanding with a startup scenario. Say I'm running a young company. My viability, V, is my runway, my funding, and the trust my team has in me. I decide we need to scale globally in 6 months.
Okay, aggressive.
Right. That aggressive expansion is a massive external burden. B, the workload is crushing. Because of that load, my co-founders start fighting, communication breaks down, and morale tanks. That's the internal tension. If the burden and the tension combined are larger than my initial funding and team trust, my margin drops below zero. What happens to the company?
In the language of APT, your company enters non-coherent continuation.
Non-coherent continuation. It sounds clinical, but it's terrifying.
It is the formal definition of a dead system walking. You might still be operating, you might still have an office and a product driven by the pure momentum of past success. But structurally, your system no longer has the integrity to support its own existence. You are accumulating hidden debt, and collapse is a mathematical certainty, whether it takes 3 weeks or 3 years.
A dead system walking. That phrasing stuck with me because it explains why so many institutions or relationships seem fine on Tuesday and suddenly implode on Wednesday. They didn't break on Wednesday.
No, they didn't.
They entered non-coherent continuation months ago, and they were just burning through the last fumes of their viability.
Which is why passing the initial admissibility gate isn't the end of the story. Once a path becomes real, it enters the ultimate testing ground. The Noetican texts refer to time not as a clock on the wall, but as the arena of admissibility.
Because time introduces the ultimate auditor entropy.
Time is the verification medium. Your admissibility margin doesn't just need to be positive on the day you make a decision. It has to survive the longitudinal horizon. Entropy is the constant universal law of degradation pushing against your systems every single day.
And if existence is ongoing becoming, and entropy is constantly trying to break things down, then there is only one possible existential response. The hero of this entire framework is maintenance.
Maintenance is the master discipline of the builder. If you are not actively maintaining a system, it is already fragmenting.
That feels so heavy, like invisible tax on existence. Every friendship, every piece of code, every societal norm has this tax, and you can dodge it. You can coast on early momentum. But uncorrected drift starts to pile up as what the sources call maintenance debt.
And just like financial debt, maintenance debt compounds. If you ignore it long enough, you hit a threshold called reconstruction failure.
Ouch.
That's the point of total irreversibility. The system doesn't just need a tune-up, it is fundamentally shattered in a way that cannot be put back together. The bridge falls, the marriage ends.
The framework makes a really profound point here about failure. We tend to view failure as this tragic, unfair destruction. But the admissible path argues that failure is just reality auditing your margin. Failure is reality exposing your weak assumptions.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, reality does not negotiate. It doesn't care about your intentions, your clever branding, or your optimism. This exposes why the framework demands profound humility from anyone trying to build something.
Right.
In this context, humility isn't about having a low opinion of yourself. Humility is an operational requirement. It's the constant awareness that your systems are fragile and require vigilance. Arrogance is just ignoring reality's audit until the maintenance debt bankrupts you.
What I found most fascinating about this deep dive wasn't just the math or the philosophy in isolation, but how the Noetican texts map this exact same framework across completely different fields. They treat the admissible path as a universal law.
It truly scales. In physics, we look at dynamical systems and see viability kernels and control limits, these strict mathematical boundaries, where if a system gets pushed too far, no amount of energy can stabilize it.
Right.
That's the admissibility margin in thermodynamics. The arrow of time and the second law of thermodynamics strictly dictate which physical transformations are permitted.
But then you jump from physics into ancient and global philosophies, and it's the exact same shape. I was reading the section connecting this to Immanuel Kant, and it clicked. Kant's categorical imperative basically says you should only act according to a rule that you would want to become a universal law.
How would you translate that into the admissibility formula?
Well, if my actions say lying to get ahead was universalized, trust would collapse. The societal support structure would vanish. The tension, key, would utterly destroy the societal viability, V. My action has a negative margin for humanity, therefore, ethically, it's inadmissible.
It's a perfect mapping. And you can apply that same lens to Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism, which argues that when you choose a path, you bear the crushing weight of choosing for all mankind. Or look at Buddhism.
Oh, right.
The concept of craving in Buddhism is essentially unchecked generative possibility, the desire for unbounded, constant attachment without constraint. And what does it lead to?
Suffering.
Exactly, suffering. It is a violation of the admissible path.
The one that really resonated with me was the African philosophy of Ubuntu. I am, because we are. It is the ultimate expression of the supreme canonical law. A person is only a person through other persons. Your continuation is entirely dependent on the continuation of the shared support system.
Right.
If you harm the community, you harm your own viability. It's APT math applied to human soulcraft.
But the sources don't just dwell in the past or in abstract philosophy. The most urgent application they discuss is staring us in the face right now. Technology and AI governance.
AI is the ultimate manifestation of runaway capability, isn't it? It's raw possibility moving at light speed.
The Noetican framework argues that deploying artificial intelligence cannot just be treated as an engineering benchmark. Hitting a certain parameter count or capability threshold is not a mandate to release it. AI deployment is a path of massive systemic power, and it must pass the verification of admissibility.
The sources outline two specific constraints for AI inspectable agency and interruptible control. What do those actually mean in practice?
Inspectable agency means that the reasoning process of the AI, how it arrives at a decision, cannot be a total black box to human creators. We have to be able to audit its margin.
Got it.
Interruptible control is even simpler. There has to be a brake system. If humans cannot intervene and stop the continuation of the system's actions, it lacks interruptible control.
So if a tech company deploys a superintelligent system that we can't understand and we can't unplug,
then they have violated the supreme canonical law. A system that humans cannot correct is not just a regulatory risk, it is a fundamental surrender of human agency. It risks corrupting the foundational conditions of society that allowed us to build the technology in the first place. Under the admissible path, that kind of AI is inherently, mathematically inadmissible.
wow. Okay, so we've covered thermodynamics, Kant, AI governance, and suspension bridges.
We have.
But what does this all actually mean for you and me, the listener, going about our day? I mean, most of us aren't coding global AI networks.
The beauty of the admissible path is that it is fractal. It applies to a global civilization, and it applies to a single human mind. We are not just passive gears in a thermodynamic machine grinding down toward entropy. We are conscious participants.
We have the unique ability to perceive consequences, calculate our margins, and intentionally choose which possibilities we make real.
And that conscious participation brings us to the final step of the semantic pipeline we discussed earlier. After possibility, constraint, verification, admissibility, and continuation, we finally arrive at meaning.
Meaning. I feel like modern culture has completely cheapened the concept of meaning. We treat it as something you can just instantly declare. You go on a retreat, feel a shallow wave of emotion, and say, I found meaning.
The texts reject that entirely. In this framework, meaning is defined as accumulated coherence. It is the existential weight that a system earns by surviving the arena of time.
Meaning is the reward for paying your maintenance tax. You don't find meaning. You forge it through responsibility, sacrifice, and a sustained, honest interaction with reality.
Yeah.
You earn it by holding your boundaries and maintaining your support structures over and over and over again.
It is the ultimate reward for persisting lawfully.
Let's pull all these threads together. The admissible path is a doctrine of bounded becoming. It forces us to confront the fact that capability is not legitimacy.
Right?
Just because you can scale that business or build that software or stretch yourself to the limit doesn't mean you have the right to do it. True freedom requires the architecture of constraint, and existence is an active, earned right.
To embody this philosophy, the framework introduces its ultimate human archetype, the steward builder.
I love this part.
This is the ideal.
Yeah.
A steward builder is someone who possesses immense generative capability but creates without recklessness. They govern their systems without domination. Above all, a steward builder ensures that the future inherits more structural support than it inherits burden. They don't just cut the ribbon on the bridge, they accept the lifelong responsibility of inspecting the steel.
The future isn't owed our boundless optimism, it is owed our rigorous responsibility. And that brings us to a final, somewhat provocative thought to leave you with today. We spent a lot of time talking about temporal fragility, maintenance debt, and this idea that reality acts as the ultimate verification engine.
It is. Reality is an auditor that will inevitably expose all hidden instability.
So I want you to look at your own life. Scan your relationships, your career trajectory, your physical health, or even the mental frameworks you use to get through the day. What specific maintenance debt are you currently hiding? Where are you coasting on the momentum of raw capability while quietly ignoring the decay of your foundational support structures? Because whether you acknowledge the debt or not, reality is quietly waiting to audit you.
That is a deeply clarifying question to end on.
Thanks for joining our deep dive into the source material today. We'll catch you next time.